When the very foundations of society seem to be crumbling and well-meaning friends tell you to run for your life, is it an act of wisdom to seek safety? Or is it actually a sin of distrust?
That is the question, isn't it? And it's one we are going to find the answer to today.
We're-
We're looking at the ancient wisdom found in Psalm 11, specifically through the lens of Charles Spurgeon's classic work, The Treasury of David.
Welcome to the Pilgrim's Rest channel. Our purpose is to introduce spiritual books that have been passed down through the generations so that every saint walking the heavenly journey may find rest, nourishment, and renewed strength here.
It's good to be here. And honestly, the text we're looking at today couldn't be more relevant to, well, to anyone feeling the pressure of a chaotic world. We're diving into the Treasury of David, which is Spurgeon's magnum opus on the Psalms. We are laser focused on Psalm 11.
And Spurgeon gives this psalm a specific title, the Song of the Steadfast. But before we get to the steadfast part, I think we have to talk about the panic, because the context here is, it's intense.
It is absolutely high stakes. Spurgeon sets the scene for us. This is David, likely at the court of King Saul, and the atmosphere isn't just tense, it's toxic.
Right. Hostility is rising.
Spurgeon describes Saul as hunting David as a partridge upon the mountains.
So you have the seated king, Saul, turning the entire machinery of the state against David, the future king. It's a political crisis, but it's also a spiritual one.
Exactly. And our mission today is really to figure out how to maintain faith when the whole world, maybe even your friends, are screaming at you to run.
And that screaming starts right at the beginning of the text, doesn't it?
It does. Let's get into it.
Okay, so Psalm chapter 11, verse 1 says, "In the Lord put I my trust. How say you to my soul, flee as a bird to your mountain."
Such a striking image, flee as a bird.
But I have to play devil's advocate here for a second. If a king is literally throwing spears at you, which Saul actually did, and you have friends telling you to get out of town, isn't that just sound advice?
It seems like it.
Why does Spurgeon frame this as a problem?
My first instinct would be to run. And that's the nuance, right? On the surface, it looks like simple prudence. It looks like survival. But Spurgeon argues that in this specific instance, the advice was actually a temptation.
A temptation to distrust.
To distrust God, yes. Spurgeon suggests this advice likely didn't come from David's enemies.
Oh, that's interesting.
It probably came from his timid friends. They love David. They're alarmed for his safety. They see the spear, they see the anger, and they say, David, the odds are impossible. Go hide.
So it comes from a place of care, but it leads to a place of fear. It's that voice that says, God can't handle this one, so you better handle it yourself by, disappearing.
Precisely. And Spurgeon connects this to a moment in Nehemiah's life.
Oh, right, when he was rebuilding the wall of Jerusalem.
Yes, and his enemies tried to trick him into hiding in the temple to save his life. And Nehemiah's response was just incredible. He says, "Shall such a man as I flee?"
Shall such a man as I flee? That's about identity, isn't it?
It is so deeply about identity. And Spurgeon points out the trap here. If David had fled right then, based on panic, it would have been a breach of duty.
It would have looked like cowardice.
Exactly. It would have given his enemies the very ground for accusation they were looking for. He might have survived the spear, but he would have lost his standing as God's anointed.
And that metaphor the Friends use is fascinating. Flee as a bird. It implies such fragility.
Spurgeon loves that imagery.
Yeah.
He notes that David actually often compared himself to birds in the Psalms. In his youth, he's like an eagle. In his sorrow, he's an owl in the desert.
But not here.
But here, he completely refuses to be that timid bird, fluttering away at the first sign of trouble. He's rejecting the identity of the victim.
It's almost like he's saying, I am not a sparrow to be shooed away. I'm a soldier at his post.
That's it, exactly.
But we can't ignore the reality of the threat. I mean, this wasn't just paranoia. Verse 2 says, "For lo, the wicked bend their bow."
And the danger was incredibly imminent. Spurgeon highlights the phrasing. The arrow is already fitted to the string. This isn't a threat of future violence.
It's an assassination attempt in progress.
Right. And notice the method. They shoot privily or in the dark.
So it's a sniper situation. You don't even know where the shot is coming from.
Which, usually makes fear even more potent. It's one thing to fight an enemy you can see on a battlefield. It's another thing entirely to know someone in the shadows has an arrow pointed at your heart.
But Spurgeon's point is that even with the arrow on the string, David refused to yield to that logic of fear.
He did.
And that logic is all summed up in verse 3. I think this is the verse that really resonates today. The Friends ask, if the foundations be destroyed, what can the righteous do?
Spurgeon calls this a giant objection. It is the ultimate pessimistic argument.
Let's break down what they mean by foundations, because today we might think of, I don't know, the economy or the culture.
And it's similar. In David's context and in Spurgeon's analysis, they're talking about the very structures of society, law, justice, order, truth. Under Saul's unrighteous government, those things were just collapsing.
So the argument from the timid friends is basically, David, the system is broken, justice is dead, there is no hope of a fair trial, so what's the point of staying?
It is such a heavy question. If society's structures fall apart, if the rules don't matter anymore, helplessness feels like the only rational response.
What can the righteous do? It implies the answer is, well, nothing.
It breeds total pessimism. If the system is broken, run away. That is the logic of the world. But this brings us to the core in this whole deep dive. How does a person of faith answer that question?
Because Spurgeon says we answer it very differently.
Very differently. And he gets very technical with the language here, dissecting that little word can.
He does, doesn't he?
He draws this really sharp distinction between what the wicked can do and what the righteous can do. Think about it. The wicked have no limits, no conscience. They can stab, they can poison, they can lie.
Right. If you're willing to cheat, you have a much larger playbook. You can do whatever it takes.
Exactly. But the righteous are limited. They are bound by God's law. They cannot do evil so that good may come. So in a purely physical sense, when the foundations are destroyed, the righteous look like they're at a massive disadvantage.
So the friends are saying you can't fight dirty and the system is rigged, so you automatically lose. Just run.
But Spurgeon flips the table. He has this incredible line. He says, there is no such word as impossibility in the language of faith.
Wow.
And then he says, that martial grace knows how to fight and conquer, but she knows not how to flee.
So the can of the righteous isn't about manipulating a broken system.
No. It's about enduring it through a higher power. And, Spurgeon uses a historical example here that just gives me chills every time I read it. He talks about Anne Askew.
The English martyr from the 1500s.
Right. She was burned at the stake for her faith. Now, just imagine her situation. The foundations of justice were totally destroyed for her. The church and the state were against her. She was in Newgate prison, awaiting execution.
The ultimate hopeless situation.
And yet, Spurgeon quotes a ballad she sang while she was in that prison. She described her faith as a ship substantial. And she said she refused to let her anchor fall for every drizzling mist.
Wait, every drizzling mist? She called the threat of being burned alive a drizzling mist?
That is the perspective of faith. She saw the threat of death by fire. The absolute worst thing the wicked could do is just a mist compared to the reality of God that is the can of the righteous.
Wow, that really puts our daily anxieties into perspective. We worry about an email, and she's calling fire a mist.
It really does.
So if we aren't supposed to look at the crumbling foundations or the errors in the dark, where are we supposed to look? We have to look somewhere.
You look up. This is the antidote to fear in Psalm chapter 11, verse 4. David stops looking around at the shadows and the archers. He says, the Lord is in his holy temple. The Lord's throne is in heaven.
I love how Spurgeon puts this. He says, God isn't just the God of the mountains, those hiding places we want to run to, but he is the God of the valleys and the battle plains too.
He calls God the great central orb. David borrows his light from heaven. It's a reality check. If God is on his throne, then Saul is just a petty tyrant on a rented footstool.
The foundations of the earth might shake, but the throne in heaven is immovable.
Exactly. And then Spurgeon dives into this really specific detail about God's observation. The verse says, his eyes behold, his eyelids try, the children of men. Spurgeon focuses on the eyelids.
Yeah, why eyelids? Why not just eyes?
This is one of those golden details that shows Spurgeon's genius as an expositor. He asks that exact question. He explains the metaphor. When a man wants to see something very, very clearly, very minutely, what does he do physically?
He squints. You narrow your eyes to block out distractions and really focus.
Exactly. You contract your eyelids to exclude other objects so you can focus entirely on the thing you're examining. Spurgeon says God looks at us through and through. He sees the danger David is in more clearly than David sees it himself.
Okay, that is comforting, but it brings up a difficult theological problem, I think.
Go on.
If God is squinting at the situation, if he sees the wicked bending the bow and the arrow on the string, why doesn't he just snap the bow? Why does he let David go through this stress? Verse 5 says, the Lord trieth the righteous.
This is the crux of the whole argument. The verse says he tries the righteous, but the wicked his soul hateth.
It just feels backwards, though. You'd think he would make life easy for the people he loves and difficult for the people he hates. But here, the righteous are the ones getting the trial?
That's the paradox Spurgeon highlights. He says, and this is a quote, "The Lord trieth the righteous. He does not hate them, but only tries them. They are precious to him, and therefore he refines them with afflictions."
It's that metallurgy image. You don't put worthless rocks in the furnace, you put gold in the furnace.
Precisely. The trial is proof of value. And Spurgeon quotes a poem by William Cowper here that is, well, it's blunt. It's almost shocking to our modern ears, but the theology is so profound.
I think I know the one you mean. Read it for us.
Cowper writes, "Bastards may escape the rod, sunk in earthly vain delight, but the true-born child of God must not, would not, if he might."
Bastards may escape the rod. That is heavy language.
It is. But think about the concept of sonship and inheritance in the ancient world. An illegitimate child, someone not really part of the family, they might be ignored, allowed to run wild. No one cares enough to discipline them because they aren't inheriting the name or the estate.
But the true son is disciplined. He's trained.
Right. So Spurgeon is saying if your life is easy, if you have no struggle, no opposition, that might actually be a bad sign.
That's the implication, isn't it? If you aren't being tested, are you actually part of the family? To flee from the struggle, like that timid bird, is to flee from the blessing of being refined. The trial is the proof of your legitimacy.
And Spurgeon also references the Puritan Henry Smith here about the work of the believer. It connects to this idea of constant training.
Oh, yes. Smith says believers are like laborers who are never out of work.
Right. He says first you fight poverty, then you fight envy, then infamy, then sickness. It's like as soon as you finish one job, God hands you another tool and points you to another field of battle.
It sounds exhausting.
It is relentless.
Yeah.
But it's purposeful. We're being built for something. And that stands in stark contrast to what happens to the wicked. We have to look at verses 6 and 7 to see the end game.
Okay.
Because while the righteous are being refined, the wicked are being targeted.
And verse 6 uses some very intense imagery. Upon the wicked he shall rain snares, fire, and brimstone.
It's pure Sodom and Gomorrah, total destruction. But look closely at that word snares.
Yeah.
Spurgeon points out this brilliant irony. Remember what the wicked were doing back in verse 2.
They were bending their bows, hunting David in the dark.
They were hunting with piercing weapons. But verse 6 says God will rain snares on them. It's like a lasso from heaven. They hunt with arrows, but God hunts with a net. He entangles them in their own schemes.
So while they're plotting to trap the righteous, they are actually walking right into a trap sent by the Almighty.
Exactly. And Spurgeon talks about the portion of their cup.
This is a reference to the parable of Lazarus and the rich man, isn't it?
It is, yeah. He references dives, the traditional name for the rich man. The rich man received his good things in life. That was his portion, his easy life, his lack of discipline. But in the next life, his cup is filled with torment.
It's a sobering reality check. It flips the script on the friend's advice completely. They said, "Run, David, because the wicked are powerful."
And Spurgeon says, "Why run from a man who is walking into a trap set by God himself? Why fear the man who is destined for fire? The timeline of the wicked is short. The timeline of the righteous is eternal."
And that leads us right into the final assurance in verse 7. For the righteous Lord loveth righteousness.
This is the bedrock. This is why we stand firm when the foundations crumble. Not because we're stubborn or because we're heroes, but because it is God's very nature to defend the just. Spurgeon says God would deny himself if he did not defend the righteous.
And the verse ends with, his countenance doth behold the upright.
Countenance means his face, his expression. And Spurgeon has this beautiful little turn of phrase here. He says, we need never be out of countenance, for God countenances us.
That's good. If God is smiling at you, it doesn't really matter if the world is frowning at you.
It doesn't matter if the king is hunting you. If you have the favor of the King of Kings, you are safe. And that leads to Spurgeon's final exhortation in this text. He commands the listener.
What does he say?
Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. There's no room or reason for retreat.
No room or reason for retreat. So let's just recap the journey we've been on here in Psalm 11. We started with this temptation to flee like a timid bird because the foundations of society felt like they were crumbling.
And we saw that this fear, while it seems logical to the world, is actually a distrust of God. We realize that while the wicked have their bows, God has his eyes fixed on us, squinting, looking through and through, paying attention to every detail.
And finally, we learn that the very trials we want to run from are the very evidence that we are his children, that we're being refined like gold, while the wicked are, well, they're merely fattening themselves for the snare.
It is a complete overturning of worldly logic. The world says safety first. This Psalms says God first.
Before we go, I want to leave you with a final thought to chew on. We talked about that Cowper poem and the really striking idea that bastards may escape the rod.
It's a thought that sticks with you for sure.
So here is the question for you to mull over this week. If God is currently trying you with difficulties, if you feel like you're in the furnace right now, is it possible that your burning desire to escape that situation is actually a desire to escape the very process God is using to prove to you and to the world that you are his true-born child?
That's a challenging thought.
Yeah.
Are we trying to run away from our own adoption papers?
Something to think about. Thank you for listening to the Pilgrim's Rest channel. You're welcome to like, subscribe, comment, and share it with fellow pilgrims around you so that we can support and encourage one another on this journey of faith. Hope to see you next time.